Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Abigail Lang and I like to make test prep videos to help people score well on their ACT, PSAT, or AP exams. For reference, I got a 35 on the ACT as a freshman before even taking pre-calculus using these strategies that I'm going to tell you about. And using one of the strategies I will tell you about, I actually got a 31 on the ACT as a 7th grader. So definitely before I took any of the required math or science classes that are tested on the ACT. And if I'm able to get those scores without even knowing all of the content, then you definitely can get a very high score, especially if you know all of the content that's going to be tested on the ACT. So I'm going to go over the strategies that I use to get these scores, and I know that they're going to be able to help you guys out as well. So I would start off with a good prep book, and I'm going to tell you about the prep book that changed everything for me. This was the only study tool that I used in 7th grade when I was taking the ACT for the first time. And I genuinely believe this is what got me a 31. Now, I will say I've always been pretty good at math, reading, grammar, all of those things, but I'm not quite sure if I would have been able to score a 31 had I not read this book. The book is the ACT Prep Black Book, and it is like the Bible for scoring well on the ACT. This book is different from all the other ACT prep books that you're going to encounter. So you'll probably hear about the Red Book, which is the official ACT released prep book, which has their official practice tests and explanations. And this is a good book. You are actually supposed to get this book to go with the Black Book if you're using the Black Book, because what the Black Book does is it goes over tips that you can use for every single section of the ACT, but they also have practice test explanations that match up with the Red Book's explanations. And the Red Book doesn't really give everything away in terms of answer choice explanations. So let's say you missed a question on the reading section. The Red Book is going to give you a very vague explanation as to why answer A is correct over answer B. But the Black Book will show you the correct answer to that section, and it will also give you a more detailed, concise explanation of why answer A is right. It will basically tell you things that the creator of the ACT probably does not want you to know, which is why I find it very helpful. The way it explains things breaks things down to a level where anyone can understand them. Like, it takes out all the complexity and makes it so you can pick up on a bunch of different rules that are applied to the answer choices and then use them in future practice tests. The Black Book is definitely what helped me get a 36 on both the reading and the English section, especially the English section, because this book contains tips that you can use to automatically eliminate a bunch of different answers, and you're just not going to find those types of tips in the Red Book. So firstly, I would recommend, if you're starting from scratch, buy the ACT Prep Black Book and buy the ACT Prep Red Book that goes along with it. You definitely have to get these two together. This was a few years ago when I got these books, so I'm sure there are probably new editions out now. I will try to link the ones that I have down below. I'll link everything down below. I'll look to see if there is a new edition, but I have the 2018-2019 Red Book and the second edition of the ACT Prep Black Book. Those are what I use to study. And I will say the Black Book, it starts off with a section about the secrets behind the ACT, and if you actually read this book cover to cover, the way you think about each question will change, and that is the secret to getting a good score on the ACT. It's all about your mindset and the way that you view the questions. So for example, one of the most life-changing revelations that I found in the Black Book was that every answer on the ACT is airtight. So, you know, in a typical reading class, your teachers will allow you to give all sorts of explanations for a different passage of writing, right? I mean, two people can read it and come up with completely different conclusions, and in a typical reading class, your teacher will be fine with both of your answers because, you know, you're in an in-class discussion and those types of things fly. Well, the ACT is not as generous in allowing you all of those nuanced interpretations of a reading section. The ACT is looking for airtight answers. This was the most life-changing revelation ever for me because it changed the way that I thought about the right and wrong answer choices. Because before I went into the ACT totally blind, thinking that the right answer was just, you know, kind of the right one, it would kind of feel the right way, and I thought that there was a lot more of an arbitrary system for picking the right answers. I didn't really think that it was something that had been discussed by multiple different test creators. And when you think about it from that perspective, the perspective that the right answers are the right answers and airtight because an entire panel of people have sat together and reasoned out why answer A is the correct answer, then all of a sudden it should make you feel a lot better because you know that the right answers have to be backed up in some way. The ACT is trying to test for certain skills, and there has to be an explanation for why answer A is better than answer B. There's always a good explanation for why the right answer is right and why the wrong answer is wrong. So it should really take a lot of that mental flip-flopping out of the equation because you now understand that there really are no two right answers. And that may be difficult because sometimes it does seem like there are two right answers because two answers will seem vaguely correct. But you have to look a little deeper, and more times than not, you're going to find that there is one answer that clearly has more justification from the text than the other answer. And with the reading section especially, it has to be justified by the text. There has to be an explicit thing said that will indicate why answer A is right and answer B is wrong. There will always be some kind of justification from the text for the answer. So I hope that makes things a little more simple for you in terms of the reading section. That is the number one tip that I would have for people who are reading those passages. And I do have to check to see which section comes first. Okay, so the English section is first, and I can say automatically, the Black Book has such good tips for the English section. I'm gonna go ahead and say the number one thing you should focus on is picking the most concise answer, 100%. That will definitely take your English score up a few points because some people will always choose the smart aleck answers. So for example, I'm just looking at a random problem here, 26, answer choice F is no change. Answer choice G is on the other hand, comma something. Answer choice H is meanwhile, comma something. And answer choice J is just something. Guess which one is correct? The most simple. Answer choice J, which is just something. If we look at another one, 38, answer choice F is no change. Answer choice G is repeat again and again at various different depths. Answer choice H is repeat at different depths that varied. Answer choice J is repeat at different depths. Again, which one is right? Answer choice J, repeat at different depths, which is arguably the most concise of all of those options. It really is that simple. You just pick the one that is most concise if you don't have an idea of how to answer it. So I wouldn't say always go with the most concise one because sometimes they're testing for actual grammar and sometimes the most concise one can be wrong grammatically. But if it's about writing style and they're just asking you which one sounds the best, it's usually the most concise one. And just knowing that single trick will take your score up many points. So moving on, I'm going to give you tips for the math section. Now, I'm actually a nerd, so when I took the ACT, I made my own little ACT prep guide, I guess you could call it. My little ACT handbook. And so I wrote for the math section, number 1 tip, every question gives you all the information that you need to solve it. So automatically you see a question on the math section, what do? Think of every single formula or concept that it could relate to, right? So you see a triangle, automatically think Pythagorean theorem, think about sine, cosine, all those different things on your calculator. And once you kind of do a brain dump of all of the concepts that the question could be testing on, you can usually piece together some sort of solution. So that just helps a lot. Don't just sit around and look at it and do nothing. Don't just expect the right answer to come to you. Don't just expect to know what to do. Lay out all of the possible solutions or concepts, and then when you're looking at that list, you can usually piece together which ones you can try. And when you just start trying and plugging in numbers, then usually it'll all fall into place. But don't just stare at the question and expect something to come to you, because more often than not, you'll just waste time and start to panic if you don't get any ideas within the first 10 seconds. So, second tip I have is watch out for not and except. This one's pretty self-explanatory. Just read the questions carefully, because you don't want to miss a question that could literally move you from a 35 to a 36. Because when you're scoring at a 35 level, one question is quite literally all it takes to get a 36 versus a 35. You miss one question because you read too fast, oh, there goes your score. So be careful with those kinds of things. Next tip I have is watch out for unit changes. Always convert before you do any sort of calculations. And this is really important because sometimes they will ask questions, especially about cars or transportation, and they'll say miles per gallon or like something like that, and they'll want you to convert the units. And if you don't pay attention, sometimes the answer choices will change the units. So especially from centimeters to meters or something like that, if you don't read carefully, you're going to end up choosing the wrong answer. So always look out for unit conversions. Next tip I have is read every problem and answer choice all the way through before starting. I can't count the number of times when I was studying for the exam or doing a practice test when I would read a question and I would assume that I knew what it was talking about. So I would start working out an equation only to realize that there was some little caveat or some little piece of information that I missed that completely changed the way that I worked the problem. So for example, especially with word problems, if you go ahead and start to write down an equation before you've even read the whole thing, sometimes they'll add an extra little tidbit of information at the end of the question that you actually need to get to the right answer. So always be sure to read those things thoroughly, and that way you're not going to work your way through an entire problem only to realize that you've done it wrong. Next very important tip that I have is use the circle and return method. So basically this means that you go through the test one time and you answer all of the really easy ones, and if there's a problem that's taking you a while to solve, circle it, move on to the easier ones, and then on your second run through, then work through all of those moderately hard questions. This is very important because I will say, as I said in my PSAT prep video, time management is pretty much the most important thing. So even if you're a genius, if you're too slow in working through the problems, you're not going to get the score that you want, because more often than not, you're going to run out of time on the math section, because I'm pretty sure it's 60 minutes for 60 questions. So you have to be really, really fast working through all of your problems. So that is why you need to be doing multiple passes through the math section. First one, knock out every easy question, because that way you're securing those easy points and you know you're not going to miss out on the easy ones. Imagine if you went through every single problem in direct sequence and then you ran out of time at the end and missed out on something easy. It would be really bad. Now, I will say that the ACT math section tends to be more sequenced, so it will start off easier and then move on to the harder questions by the end. So usually you'll just be fine if you start off working through them sequentially, but sometimes there will be a few problems in the middle that are harder than you expect, and that's why you'll want to go through it multiple times to ensure that you're not missing anything. Now, I will say, if you are working on a moderately hard question, which is a question where you kind of know how to do it, but you know it's going to take you some time, then I would go ahead and do like a rudimentary job on the question. Just do it as fast as you can. Don't double check your work. Just pick the answer that you think is correct, like based off of your first run through, and then return to those if you have time, because with some questions, you want to just go ahead and knock them out, even if they do take a lot of time, but you may not have time to actually go through those questions again, unless you have a lot of extra time at the end, in which case definitely check over the moderately hard questions that you did quickly. But with those, you want to just do the best job you can and move on, because you want to save the most amount of time for the harder questions that will take a lot of time and that you may not know how to solve. So, moving on. Oh, this is good. Final tip I have is to consider the context of whatever problem you're solving. For example, if you're doing a problem with distance, you can't have negative distance. You're not going to be moving negative 20 feet per second unless you're talking about velocity. But if you're just talking about speed, you definitely want to make sure that you're considering the context. Or like if they're asking you for the perimeter of something, you can't have a negative number. So don't make simple mistakes like that, because they will definitely cost you. Now, another tip that I have for the English section is actually to use the vertical scan method, which means that when you're looking at the answer choices, just vertically scan down instead of reading each one side to side, because this will allow you to easily spot differences between the answer choices. Like comma placement, it's so much easier to just look up and down, because you'll see like comma here, 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 here. You'll automatically know the differences between them, and that'll save you a lot of time. Another tip that I have is when it says best accomplishes X, always use evidence from the text. So maybe they'll say, pick the answer choice that best accomplishes Maria is mad at her father, or something like that. Always use the evidence from the text and don't make any assumptions, because those writing sections where they're asking you to pick and fill in the best ending to the sentence almost always need to be based off of evidence. You should not just be choosing like the most wordy or complex answer. Definitely with the English section questions that are asking about reading comprehension, they're more like the reading section questions where you want to go based off of evidence. Now, these are just little tidbits of information, but I know that they'll help with the English section. You want to know that with a plural noun ending in S, like cats or girls, the possessive form is always just an extra apostrophe at the end. So don't do cats apostrophe S if you're doing the possessive of multiple cats. Just do cats apostrophe, you're fine. Don't overcomplicate that. That'll definitely be tested on the English section. Another thing that you will see that actually a lot of people don't know how to do is the difference between who and whom. Whom is someone/something receiving action. So the person whom was hit by a car. I know that sounds kind of weird, but that's just the way it works. And who is someone/something doing an action. So the person who hit the pedestrian with their car. Now with whom, I'll repeat again. So with the pedestrian, it would be the pedestrian whom he hit with his car. There it is, simplified. Once you understand this difference, it'll help a lot with your score on the ACT English section. Now I'll move on to tips that I have for the reading section. Know that everything is airtight. As I said before, that's something that the Black Book really goes into detail over. But read precisely and don't add any details or assumptions of your own, because it will bite you in the butt. As I said, they're looking for answers that are explicitly explained by the text in the chapter, so don't overcomplicate it or add your own little details, because more often than not, those are not going to help you reach the right conclusion. Every answer must be blatantly stated in the text is the next thing that I wrote in all caps, so definitely make sure that you're looking for explicit wording to support your answers. Another big thing is watch out for reasonable statements that are not in the text. Sometimes they will throw an answer choice in there that seems perfectly reasonable and rational given the information in the text, but that is not actually stated in the text. So it'll be the type of answer that will make sense if you really think about it, but if it's not explicitly stated, do not go with it, because they're just trying to throw you off there. They're looking to see if you can read the text that they gave you and then come to conclusions, not read the text that they gave you and then make some inferences, then come to conclusions. So don't fall for those answers. They're definitely trick answers. Another thing is watch out for answers that are off by 1 or 2 words. Sometimes they'll say a really good answer and then they'll add a word like always or never, and those words will completely invalidate the answer. Absolutes are almost never a good thing when you're looking for standardized test answers, so be sure to check for those 1 or 2 words that can make a correct answer choice wrong. Another tip I have is to just read fast. Make a conscious effort the moment you open the reading section to read fast. It will pay off. Because if you don't really make a conscious effort to read fast, you're probably going to end up reading too slow, and then you're not going to get in all the information that you need before you answer the questions. So just making the conscious effort to read fast will help a lot and make sure that you get through everything. Another tip is consciously check in with yourself every minute or 2 to remind yourself to read fast. Because sometimes when we're reading these really convoluted passages, our minds will drift off and you won't really be retaining the information that you're reading because you'll be passively reading, if that makes sense. You want to actively check in with yourself every few minutes to make sure that you're still focused on the text and picking up details. Now for my science tips. Everything you need to answer the questions is on the page. So use your finger as your tool. So if you're reading an answer choice and they're asking you to pick from a different array of numbers. So answer choice A is like 5 milliliters, 10 milliliters, 15, 20. And they're asking you to pick which one of those matches with a graph. Keep your finger on the answer choices and a finger on the graph so that you can easily look back and forth and you don't get lost in all the details. This will help a lot in keeping you on time and answering the problems quickly. The next tip I have is, again, watch out for unit conversions. Know the difference between like centigrams, milligrams, kilograms. You should definitely know all of those because they may ask you to do some very simple unit conversions. Another thing is, if you get a background knowledge question that you don't know, pick the answer that seems most closely related to the subject matter in the question. So if it's about osmosis, for example, definitely pick one about water. You don't want to be picking an answer choice about carbon dioxide. Water is usually most closely related to osmosis, so pick the choice with water. Another thing is that you should know the difference between an independent and dependent variable. They will definitely ask you what the independent variable in some sort of study is. An independent variable is the variable that the scientists are actively changing. So for example, they're choosing to show one plot of beans light and the other plot gets no light. The light is the independent variable because the scientists are changing it. Now the dependent variable is influenced by the independent variable that you're changing. So the number of beans that grow on the sunny plot is the dependent variable. And it is influenced by whether the plot gets sun or no sun, which is the independent variable. So definitely know the differences between those. Another big tip I have for science is to draw pictures and annotate as much as possible. Sometimes it just helps to write a brief summary of whatever you've just read. So maybe you're reading some section about the influence of sunlight on carbon dioxide production and something. If it tells you something like sunlight increases carbon dioxide production in X species, write that down on the side. Like just write down sunlight, up arrow, carbon dioxide. And that'll help you because those little annotations you can look back on when you're answering questions, and that way you're not going to have to reread every passage multiple times. So one more huge tip that I have for the math section is the plugging things in method. This method is so huge because whenever you look at a question, some people think that you should just start to form your own equation for it and then solve it, especially if it's a word problem. But more often than not, what you want to do is just start plugging in answers. And you should usually start, like if they give you an equation especially, start with the middle answer. So like if you have 10, 15, 20, 30, start with 15 or 20. So if you do 20 and your answer is too big or doesn't match, then you know you should go down to 15 and 10. Whereas if you start and you work through the answers in sequential order, then maybe you'll do 5 and it's too small. So then you'll need to go to 10, still too small, 15, still too small, 20, perfect. But if you just done 15 and seen that it was too small, you wouldn't have to do 5 or 10. So just keep that in mind. You might want to do the middle answer choices when you're plugging in numbers from the answers. That will help you a lot in terms of saving time. And even if you look at the answer choices, sometimes it can show you what you should be doing. Because if all the answer choices are very big numbers, you're probably not going to be doing an equation that involves a lot of dividing, right? So just be mindful of those things and use whatever clues they give you in the answer choices to guide your reasoning. Now moving on to general ACT tips for studying. Firstly, as I said, get a prep book and go through the prep book, go through the practice tests, figure out what you're good at and what you're bad at. Because if you're really awful at math but you're good on science, don't spend all your time studying those equally. That makes no sense. If you're crunched on time like most juniors and seniors are, you need to be studying what you're the worst at. So go ahead, and if you haven't started any sort of studying yet, you need to just get a prep book, do a practice test, figure out your weaknesses, then target those specifically. And if you have time, then go ahead and strengthen the things that you're already good at. Now I will move on to test day tips. And these are my little gems of information that you're not going to find in an ACT prep book, because believe it or not, I definitely think that what you do in the testing center and during the breaks can play a huge role in how well you do on the ACT. So if I remember correctly, the ACT has an English section, then a math section, and then break, and then you do the reading and the science. This break, you're gonna have to forgive the pun, can actually be make or break. I think that definitely what you do during that break can play a huge role in how well your reading and science sections go. So obviously, before the ACT, drink a lot of water because it really does help keep your brain sharp. And if you feel like your thoughts are getting kind of fuzzy, drink water. It helps a lot. And you have a break halfway through, so it's not going to really be damaging to your score if you have to pee through the test, because you can definitely use the bathroom after the math section is over and then you'll be fine. Water definitely helps a lot. I would advise, obviously, get a good night of sleep beforehand. I would say actually up to 2 days beforehand. Get 2 nights in a row of very good sleep, because I can definitely tell a difference when you're working off of 2 days of good sleep versus 1 day of good sleep. Definitely prioritize sleep. Eat a healthy breakfast, not something with a lot of carbs. Don't do that. It will make you lethargic and you're going to feel like your brain is foggy. And when you're reading those science and reading sections with brain fog, you are going to want to actually die, because your brain won't be able to pick up all the information that it needs in order to answer the questions correctly. So don't do that to yourself. Eat a breakfast with a lot of protein. Like, make eggs, have cottage cheese and yogurt with that. Whatever you do, don't go for one of those sugary cereals like, I don't know, Captain Crunch or Cinnamon Toast Crunch. It's not going to go well for you. So that being said, now we'll move on to what you should do during the breaks. This is kind of information I shouldn't be giving away because it feels wrong. You're not going to really see anyone else doing this during the break, but firstly, use the bathroom. Rush to the bathroom so you don't get stuck waiting in line the entire break. Secondly, you need to pack a lot of sugar with you for the break. Because your brain needs glucose to function, and after you've been sitting there working on the English and math, you might start to feel a little bit of brain fog. And that's not very good if you're about to go take the most wordy sections of the ACT, which are the reading and the science sections. If your brain is slowing down and then you're faced with that, good luck to you, because quite frankly, it's really hard to get through all of those passages quickly if your brain is starting to slow down and running out of fuel from your breakfast. The break time is when you want to down crazy amounts of sugar. So I'm talking bring pixie sticks, bring Rice Krispie treats, bring all sorts of sugar, and it's going to help you a lot. Pixie sticks are great. Just whatever pure form of sugar you can get, bring that with you. Obviously, you're not going to be able to get caffeine. Caffeine would be great, but they're not going to allow you to start popping caffeine pills in the hallway, so don't try that. It will definitely get you in trouble. But sugar, you are allowed to bring as much of that as you want. So bring your favorite candies, pixie sticks, Rice Krispie treats, all sorts of sugary, delightful treats. And you will definitely notice that your energy will spike as soon as you get back from your break. And when you're opening the reading section, it's like you've been invigorated with an entirely new night of sleep. You will feel so energetic, and that's what you need to push through the reading section. Now, I will warn you, the energy may start to wane after about an hour. So this can sometimes be detrimental to your science section. But I would say if you have a little bit of protein along with your sugar binge during the break, it does usually kind of keep you from having a sugar crash. So what I would do personally is bring a bunch of candy, but also bring a protein bar. And you don't need to worry about the calories of your break snack, because how many times are you going to be doing this in your life? Just go ahead and pack as many calories as you can during your break. And you know what? It'll pay off in the long run. I hope that these tips helped you, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I would love to help you out. And if you want another video on tips or anything like that, also tell me, because I have so much ACT experience. I could make a million videos on my study strategies for the ACT. But these are all the very basic things I did that I think definitely helped me score well on the ACT. I got a 35 multiple times and the 31 in 7th grade, and that should prove to you that you can definitely get a high score even if you don't know all the content. These tips will be super helpful, so I'm glad that you watched the video because you're giving yourself a huge advantage. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next week's video.